And welcome to another episode of Stuck in My Mind podcast. I am your host, Wize. And today my guest is Fractional CSO, a best-selling author of the How to Build Sustainability into Your Business Strategy. He works with leadership teams facing increasing ESG pressure from customers, lenders, and regulators, helping them embed sustainability into core strategy into a practical board-ready. Today we're talking governance, climate readiness, and how to turn ESG into commercial advantage. Welcome to the show, Lee Stewart.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, the pleasure's mine. How you doing today?
Not too bad, thank you. Coming to you all the way from Australia in Sydney. It's great to be on your show.
Oh, thank you, man. I really appreciate your time. First of all, let's start off with, what is ESG?
Yeah, so the ESG is a short acronym, stands for environmental, social, and governance. What you're seeing now is companies under pressure to look beyond profit. How are you looking after the environment in terms of carbon emissions, waste, environmental aspects around that, of course. Then the social part, the S, is how you're looking after your people. Also, that extends to the communities, your supply chain, factories are overseas, how they're treated as well, the communities you operate in, and then the governance, which is where a lot of companies probably let themselves down a bit as well, is how do you govern that? How do you make sure it stays front of mind, that you're actually tracking well, that you're improving those aspects that you might have found that probably aren't so desirable in your business. So ESG is that short acronym for that.
So what led you into ESG and sustainability strategy?
Yeah, really good question. I see myself very fortunate enough to grow up in a country called New Zealand, which is a 3-hour flight sort of out of Australia. And you grow up with the outdoors. And at my doorstep, you had mountains, ocean, forests. And it's ingrained in most New Zealanders, or called Kiwis, is appreciation of the outdoors. And as most Kiwis, being a small country in the bottom end of the world, as soon as we get old enough in our late teens, we want to travel. And that's exactly what I did. I traveled, especially around Southeast Asia. And then you start seeing how we're treating the planet, and society is not as great as what you grew up with in New Zealand. You start thinking, geez, there's a real problem here. And it started really impacting me. And I started thinking about, well, how can I create a job where I could still earn a good living and do good at the same time? And I love business. I love what businesses do. I love working part of business. I think businesses, when it's running really well, is a really good environment to be in. You're doing great things, but how can I have that experience, but also do good and make sure businesses can become a greater force for good? So that's how I really got into it. There was no structured university courses or anything I could do back then. There's a lot now, and I really love the opportunities people have now to learn about that. So I really just started trying to invent the roles in the companies I was working in, and created startups and so forth, and then got embedded into large corporates for a good part of 2 decades, where I really learned a lot.
Okay. So what prompted you to write How to Build Sustainability into Your Business Strategy?
Yeah, it was built out of sheer frustration. And I spent over 20 years working in corporate strategy, working inside multi-billion-dollar companies. And from the outside, it looked successful. Boardrooms, I had budgets, had big titles, but on the inside, I kept seeing that same problem. Sustainability treated like a report, not a decision-making mindset. And I really realized I was actually stuck in my career. I mean, I was misaligning with my impact. Yes, I had a great title, had a great comfort, but I decided it just wasn't me. It was misaligned. So I walked away from that executive path to build my business ESG strategy, and to take that time out to write that book. And the book is really about focusing on embedding sustainability as a core business strategy, not as a compliance, but as leadership. And the shift for me doing that wasn't professional, it was more personal. For me to write the book, I had to let go of my identity in the corporate world, the certainty and the status you have, and to step more into purpose. And that was extremely scary. I've got 3 young children, but the writing the book really crystallized my thinking over 2 decades as to make it as simple as possible for people in businesses to pick it up, read it in 3 or 4 hours, and then start asking questions and making a difference straight away, not getting a committee together and deciding where should we go, and 3 months later you might decide on doing something. Designed for action, and get on with it and get things done, because I see so many companies get paralyzed by the subject matter, and when they can just take a walk around the factory floor and decide they can make some changes that day and start improving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, but what are leaders consistently getting wrong about ESGs?
Yeah, they're treating it like a compliance issue, and a lot of that is compliance. But I try and work with companies to look beyond compliance, because and there's a lot of argument and a lot of politics around diversity, inclusion, and all that other stuff. And is it all greenwashing and hoopla? It's not core to the business, but I challenge that mindset, because the way compliance is designed is to create better, more resilient businesses. Those companies I work with that embrace the compliance as an opportunity get a competitive advantage. Now, what I'm talking about is when I align a sustainability strategy to the customer, I can often help create more product lines, more offerings, more engagement with customers, and ultimately more profitability. All right. And the easiest thing to do is, if you're a large energy user, look at energy efficiency. There's a dollar amount saved to that. And I would question most companies that are large energy users don't pursue energy efficiency more effectively. The byproduct of that is probably less carbon emissions generally, and a better business. And that's part of ESG. That is a bottom line issue. Those that come at it from a begrudgingly, we've got to do this bit of compliance, what's the bare minimum we can do, miss out on those opportunities. And generally, they're clients that I really don't like working for. Over time, you don't get the best out of external people coming to help, and you definitely don't get the best out of your team. Where I've seen it done well is people talk proudly about the company they work for. My company's doing these great things. It's helping this community. It's helping a graduate program for underprivileged minorities. It's helping reduce the pollution. It's helping make cleaner air. It's working together with our customers and creating better products and offerings. It's an exciting place to work for as well.
So why is it no longer optional for small and mid-market organizations to start implementing ESGs into their business?
Yeah, it's really hard, and I that's where I really like working with them, because they might not be big enough to think they have the resources to do anything. Where I would ask you is, if you're supplying a larger customer, like say a very large customer, they might have a sustainability report on targets. Have a look at what they're trying to achieve, and then map that to your products and offering and services, because you might be able to help them solve some of their biggest problems. And when I was head of sustainability at $1 billion companies that operate in over 100 countries, I was always open to ideas coming from suppliers to say, hey, Lee, I know you've got this target, you've got this issue. We have a new product or service we think can help. Or let's have a chat about how we can help you with these targets. That's gold. This is where you need to position yourself as looking at your customers. What are their challenges? What do you offer? What can you offer differently to your competitors? And especially if you're driven in a commoditized offering where all things being equal and price is a big selling point, obviously, to winning deals, sustainability can be used as that key differentiator against your competitors. And I've used that myself to help win deals. So really have a look at that and make your sustainability strategy, I implore that to be customer centric. And know what your customers are trying to achieve and how you can help them.
What exactly does a fractional CSO do?
Yeah, a fractional CSO stands for a fractional Chief Sustainability Officer. You've probably seen them pop up in terms of Chief Financial Officer as well. That might work 1 or 2 days a week, or even 1 or 2 days a month. How I'm enabling myself to create a bigger impact is to work with more companies. So where I work with is what you mentioned before, that mid-tier market might not be able to afford or aren't sure of how to set up a sustainability function. I go in there using the methodology in my book to help set up that function inside an organization. And then I pull back over time as I've helped build capability. So I will coach a senior leader on what governance of sustainability should look like. I run some of their 3 or 4 months of running their program. And then I hopefully mentor someone to take that over with probably project management skills or communication skills who's got enthusiasm to do that. And then I stay on board as their advisor. So I help them with other things like they might be trying to look at an acquisition or looking at trying to win a new account or a bit of legislation's coming their way. I help them guide them through that process. But where I think it really makes sense is I'm really good at setting up the structure and the strategy. Mm. And then you hopefully have someone in your business that knows the business really well, has got some political capital internally to get things done, who I can coach, mentor on sustainability. They know everything about the business, and then they set up for success to running it. And it makes more sense than just hiring a sustainability person and say, deal with all this. They might be really good at running a program, but might be absolutely awful at trying to set a strategy and so forth. So it de-risks it for you and also gives you a greater outcome.
What does it make more sense to hire a fractional versus when does it make more sense to hire a fractional versus full-time?
Yeah, when you're not sure about what the role entails and what you've got to have to do, you're probably getting questions already that you're very uncomfortable answering in tenders or bids or proposals around sustainability. And you might be fudging it a little bit with your answers and saying we're doing this and we're measuring this and that. That's when it's ideal to get someone in to help set up that structure. And then from that, you might decide, yes, it's maybe half a headcount or maybe a full headcount, and you're hiring someone into that role where there's a defined structure and cadence of working. That definitely makes sense. And if you get that role wrong, if you go out and just hire someone to do it, it might be 6 months before you realize it's not the right person. They haven't set it up the structures well enough, and then you're back to square one. So, and you've wasted, quite a lot of money in hiring that person, recruiting and training them and so forth, and they find out they're not the right ideal person. So where I've gone and helped, I've actually helped in that recruitment process as well, where they've had to go external and been involved in interviews and so forth. And in the first 3 to 6 months, I've designed their induction program as well and reviews with the internal HR team as well.
Mm. So what are the first 3 governance moves that make ESG real inside a company?
Yeah, the first 3, first of all, is understanding where your biggest impacts are. And that is, if you're in an office, get out in your office and go and walk the factory floor or go and see for yourself. If you're producing a lot of waste, go and have a look at it firsthand and follow it where it goes, if it goes to landfill or somewhere else. Same with large emissions, or if you're impacting communities, go and spend time with people at the coalface, so to speak. From then, there is looking at doing a materiality assessment, is asking questions, interviewing people about what customers included, suppliers, what does sustainability mean to you? What do you expect from us as a business, as a supplier, as a procurement of your processes? What do you expect from us? And get those unfiltered views in. And then step 3 is really distill that down into some key core 3 or 4 things that you will do properly and do them well. And have metrics around it, measurements, whether it's reducing carbon emissions, you have your carbon footprint, you have an idea of you may need to transition out of fossil fuels to renewable energy, or if you need to do something around community, you might want to understand what's the impact of the community. Is it negative or positive? How do we create that more positive over time? What are the actions we need to do every month, every quarter, and every year? And how do we report on all that? So those are the sort of the 3 key steps. Go out and see for yourself, start doing some measurements, and then start putting it together in that sort of overall structure of a governance program.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does a board ready ESG plan on the page look like?
Yeah, really, I've seen a lot of them, and let's face it, when you're in front of the board, they've got limited capacity, limited time, and really might have so many questions that you go down a various rabbit holes and so forth. And so I mentioned, the topic is very political. What I do as a board ready strategy plan on a page is those 4 key things, or 3 or 4 key things you go after. What we want to do is structure that on a page. So you've got the 4 columns, and then across who's responsible for it, the executive responsible, what are the key action, what are our targets, what are the future actions we're looking at, what's the current status of play, and you bring that up every month in the governance meetings or quarter, and we talk to them. And the executive responsible for that might be, health and well-being and so forth, talks about the challenges and goals, strategies and so forth. The executives in that team will delegate to their staff to make sure that information's done, but also they're responsible for reporting on the board against that particular area. So that's what I've seen that boards really want, and it resonates very well with them, a very simplification of it, but clear accountability, targets, and knowing what you're going after and how you measure that performance.
So, how should leaders approach Scope 3 without overwhelming their teams?
Yeah. So, when I talk about, probably just to give you a bit of background, how we measure carbon emissions is Scope 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And a quick lesson, Scope 1 is the gas in your tank, the fuel. I just sort of describe it loosely as things you burn. Okay. If you're a coal-fired power station or aviation fuel, that could be quite big, obviously. Scope 2 is the electricity from the grid. And here in Australia, some of it's coal-fired, some of it's renewable. So each kilowatt of energy you use has a carbon component to it. So it's measuring the kilowatts by the location and the emission intensity of that. Scope, and that's generally what most companies are doing now, reporting as Scope 1 and 2. Scope 3 gets really difficult because that is emissions downstream and upstream of your supply chain. And for instance, I've been working with a large retailer and they sell toasters.
Okay.
So the carbon emissions that go into making that toaster, and then once it's sold, the shipping as well. Once it's sold, that toaster will use this amount of electricity over a certain number of years. How much carbon emissions is that going to be? That's all your Scope 3, and it gets really hard to measure it. So what you need to start thinking about is your suppliers, your supply chain, how solid is that information? If you're selling a lot of one product and you're under pressure to reduce carbon emissions, you might need to talk to that supplier about what are you doing to reduce carbon emissions, or what's the total life cycle assessment of your product, because we're reselling it and we want to know, can it be recycled at end of life to reduce carbon emissions and waste, or can you do something in your production to reduce emissions? So it's a really, really tricky thing, but it's something people are going to need to get their heads around as we look to reduce emissions across your supply chain.
So what does this climate reporting readiness look like in practical terms?
Yeah, so what we're seeing here in Australia and even the states of California, Europe as well, New Zealand, even parts of Asia, countries are adopting this framework of reporting your climate risks and opportunities and climate-related disclosures. And here in Australia, it's mandated now for certain size of companies that with your financial report, you also need to report on what how you've gone about identifying your climate risks and opportunities and your Scope 1 and 2 emissions. And then over time, you need to have that verified with the same rigor as your financials. So what we're seeing now is companies are now looking inwardly first, understanding their risks, opportunities, carbon emissions, but are forced to actually look across their supply chain, which leads to your earlier question around Scope 3 emissions, where I'm working with some clients now who have been asked difficult questions about where does your product come from, what happens into life, what's the embodied carbon in that, how can we reduce that, because they're making calls on their future suppliers that can help them hit their targets. So it sort of flows downhill that way. So what we're seeing, especially around climate reporting, is boards are needed to get up to speed very quickly on understanding what climate risks operate in their business. And we're talking about what happens when global heating gets to more than 2 or 3 degrees, how that's going to impact supply chains and so forth. And where this really gets interesting is the agriculture sector, where if you're a fast fashion, cotton in the Middle East, middle area of Asia might not be able to be grown in 20 years' time because there's no water. These are certain things that cause you might not be able to. I've worked in things like agriculture, milk production might not be able to happen because it's too hot and the cows can't produce enough milk. What does that impact on the longevity of a factory you're going to build that's destined to last for 50 years of processing milk? These are sort of really interesting questions that force the boards and executives to think long term and think outside of the box that they're used to. So it takes a bit of mental capacity too.
So how do you build the ESG into strategy without slowing growth?
Yeah, really interesting question. And you do it alongside, you don't stop the business straight away. You look at the quick wins. And this is where I think what I talked earlier about. If you're a large energy user, I think you can save energy. Energy efficiency can normally pay for itself. There are other things where you definitely don't want to slow growth, is looking at your sales and how can sustainability positively impact sales. And that's looking at your, maybe if you've got 50 clients, trying to do analysis, which top 5 care most about this, and maybe have a conversation with them. That can help you with the internal business case. Yes, we might need to invest in these areas around ESG, but these top 5 clients value that. And maybe we might be able to charge a premium for them, or at least they will want to stay with us longer because we have this program in place. So definitely don't stop everything overnight to do ESG. There's a lot of things you can do while keeping the systems going, for sure.
Mm. So how can climate risk become commercial advantage?
Yeah, definitely. It makes better decision making, for sure. If you are looking at long term, especially those building plants, factories, interesting one, data center growth is explosive here in Australia and the US as well. They need lots of energy and water to cooling and stuff. If you're going to build a data center that's going to last 50 years, you want to build it in a place that's got secure access to a lot of energy, ideally secure pipeline for renewable energy and access to water. But you also want to make sure that you're not taking water from the community, because if the community needs to decide, if the government needs to decide, am I going to provide drinking water for my people, or I'm going to let this data center operate, you're going to probably choose your people over the data center, quite rightfully. So the data centers need to be part of that solution around water conservation, or making sure water can be used, or looking to change how they process or cool their data centers as well, or being actively involved in development of renewable energy like most of them are now too. So these are things that can become a competitive advantage for you, making better decisions. Also, to my point earlier, larger companies asking questions of smaller suppliers will be looking at this as well, because another example was supply chains, transport, making sure that you've got a resilient transport hubs. We're seeing here in Australia and New Zealand lots of floods, lots of roads disruption around that. What's the resilience of your partners on getting products through? Can you use mixed modal, rail, road, sea freight? Depending on how robust is your systems. So these are very key questions that force you to look beyond your business into wider communities and environments and society, and the role that you play is going to become more and more critical.
So what role does ESG play in tenders and access to capital, if any?
Yeah. I've seen this come up a couple of times where there's been a lot of the banks are doing what's known as sustainability linked loans or green bonds, and they're offering a discount of basis points of financing of interest rates. So I've worked with one company that did a management buyout, was involved in getting about $300 odd million in funding capital to do this buyout of the business. Attached to that was a sustainability linked loan clause where they had to have a sustainability strategy, know their climate emissions, and set targets. So I worked with that company to get that done in their first year and set them up with their strategy to report. So, and I've worked in companies where they've gone ahead and got a sustainable financing framework ahead of before they need access to capital as an insurance policy. So there's a lot of money out there that you can get if you want funding or debt financing even, but having a robust sustainability strategy means you're more palatable to more sources of funding as well. So it can help you that way. So that's where I'm seeing that play out with larger amounts of sustainability linked loans, access to capital as well. But that's also playing out for the smaller guys. A lot of the banks are offering smaller chunks of funding for sustainability linked loans, down to even things like farm levels as well. Individual farmers can do things and get better financing terms and conditions by having environmental management plans and so forth around that, because the banking and funders know that's a more resilient, adaptable business. It's probably more sustainable for climate shocks as well, or other shocks, because they have robust environmental plans and strategies in place.
So how do companies avoid greenwashing while still communicating progress?
Yeah, look, it's really important, and greenwashing is you don't want to fall foul of the regulator. So what I do say, and I've done this in many workshops I've run with marketers, act as a persona. If you see you're going to make a claim around your product, you have to back it up, and you can't be marking your own homework, so to speak. You've got to get a third party verification. So if you say this is environmentally friendly, I go, so what? Why is it environmentally friendly? Oh, because it's 100% compostable and recyclable. Okay, prove it. Do that thing. Take it to my home. I've done this at home in my worm farm, and it hasn't or get a third party verification for that if you want to be carbon neutral or have a science-based target for climate change. Go get science-based target certified. So avoid those greenwashing. Beware of those claims, and I almost say, come to a persona with any claim you make as a Greenpeace activist, so to speak, and how can you pull that apart? Because that's what will happen especially if you're a large, big target, like a large brand. Even if you're a smaller brand, just ask those internal questions. Where I see a lot of people fall foul too, they go, oh, we've got this one product line that's sustainable. Well, that doesn't make your whole company sustainable. I would look at that. Okay, that's one product. Where's your policy around sustainability in general? What are you doing around your other 94 products? Are they all wrecking the planet and ruining society? Or you've got this one, bamboo fork, So just have a look at your whole business and before you run off and do those sort of things.
What will ESG expectations look like in the next 3 to 5 years?
Oh my God, that's a really good question. I think I have hope. I have a relentless optimism that I think they will be more integral to the business. My hope is that they don't end up just being reporting. They end up actually doing and be part of the strategy. So where I'd see the businesses of the future will get it where sustainability is at the top table, but it's helping guide, like finance guides the business into the right long-term thinking. Ideally, a lot of companies have realized that it's linked directly to revenue, and that's where sustainability needs to go. So the ones of the future that will do really well, the sustainability practitioners, in my mind, are the ones that make it customer-centric and are linking their sustainability programs to the revenue of the business that they work for. So that's the key area I see. Otherwise, it's just window dressing, and when things go bad, you'll be facing cuts to your program because you haven't demonstrated the tangible value of your sustainability strategy.
So if a leadership team feels behind right now, what's the first 90-day move?
Yeah. Go out and have a look for yourself. Walk the factory floor, ask questions, do some research around what is your biggest impacts and go and see them for yourself. I'll do that in the first 30 days, depending on how large your company is. Ask questions, and especially when I'm looking at questions, I'm looking for the people that have been in your business a decade or longer and ask them, oh, look, we're thinking about sustainability. If I gave you a blank check, what would you do? What would you do first? And I bet you they've got the answers. That's what I do in most companies I work for. I go on. I don't want to talk too much to the executive. I want show me Bob, who's been working on that piece of machinery for 30 years or knows this place really well, and have that open conversation with Bob or Jane, and just have that open-ended question. So ask those open-ended questions as much as you can. Then you've got to get a handle on the measurements, the metrics, the key metrics that you want to go for. And then that materiality assessment, I think, is core to doing that, asking structured surveys, filtering it down, and presenting back to the business, here are our 4 key things we're going to go after. If I see companies do any more than 5, 6, 12, 15, I just call BS on it, because they're never going to get them all done, right? You've got to be focused and know what your customers want from you. So that'll be what I'd do in the first 90 days.
Awesome. And this has been amazing.
Yeah.
But we've come to the part of the show where you get the spotlight and you get to plug away, let everybody know where they can find you, websites, everything.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Look, well, here's my book here. It's on Amazon. It's how to build sustainability into your business strategy. You can find it on Amazon. Author name is Lee Stewart. My website is esgstrategy.com.au. And on the website, if you want to have a chat to me, you can book in a free chat, 20-minute chat. Even if you just want to discuss things about the book or any ideas you have around sustainability, I'm just here to help. Hopefully I can help you out there. But look, the book on Amazon's only $5 off an ebook. It's well worth a read. It's got some really pro tips in there, a step-by-step walkthrough of what you can do. I thoroughly recommend just investing 2 or 3 hours and understanding those concepts, and you will have the blueprint to actually make change in your business. So if you struggle, look at my website, book a chat. I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for being such a great guest, man. This has been really awesome.
Cool.
But don't leave just yet. Let me close out the show and we'll chat a little bit off the air. But
Yep.
thank you, Lee. You've been such a great guest, man. I appreciate your time. This has really been good.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. All right, everybody. Another great episode, man. That was really good episode. If you're a senior leader navigating ESG pressure and need clarity without hiring a full-time CSO, connect with Lee Stewart and explore his work. And if this episode helped you think differently about sustainability and risk, share it with a CEO or a CFO who needs this conversation. You know how your boy Wize does it? Peace out.